Hello, everyone. Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Avery, and I am the Executive Director of Quanta Change. Thank you so much for joining me today. So today what I want to get into is why it's so hard to get rid of those negative voices in our heads, that negative self-talk. Do you know what I'm talking about? What is it for you? Is it maybe some form of you're not good enough in some way, you're not smart enough, you're not lovable, maybe not worthy, you do everything wrong, you're a mess, things never work for me, I never do anything the right way. Is it something like that? It usually in that realm is something about either our intelligence or our capacity to achieve things, our appearance, or some aspect of our personality maybe. Or is it more like you can keep those negative voices and feelings kind of off to the side as long as you keep pushing yourself, as long as you do more all the time, as long as you achieve more, as long as you hit a certain bar and keep hitting a higher bar, as long as you try harder, as long as you win, as long as you reach certain goals, that as long as you do those things and as long as you keep pushing yourself to do those things, you can kind of keep the negative self-talk at bay. Or maybe both. Maybe you resonate with both of those like I do, and many of my clients have over the last 22 years. Some of us have both. Some of us just have more one of those things or the other. So if so, you're not alone, like I said, and I'm wondering if you've tried to work on this. Have you tried to change this in some way? Maybe you've worked on it with your therapist. Maybe you've done some form of self-help. Maybe you do affirmations, some other kind of self-help meditation to kind of calm the negative self-talk down, and kind of let it go for a bit. Maybe you've done some kind of journaling practice, maybe some gratitude journaling or something else like it. Have those things helped you? I hope that they have helped some. Have they gotten rid of the negative self-talk? Have they really put that off to the side, gotten those voices to go away? Or are you still feeling like no matter how hard you try, those negative voices are still there? Maybe are they even getting louder over time? Yeah, that too is what I've heard from lots of my clients over the years. And what I want you to know first is it's not your fault if you haven't gotten those negative voices to go away. It's not because you haven't tried hard enough. It's not because you haven't done enough. It's not because you haven't found the right journaling prompt maybe. It's really because those methods have not been able to get to the source of the kind of generating engine for that negative self-talk. So I'm going to explain where that comes from today, why the things you've been doing haven't been able to get rid of it, and what you can do to actually get those voices to calm way down, sometimes even to the point that they may not be talking to you at all anymore. So let's talk about the reason where these negative voices come from in the first place. Now, maybe you're thinking, no, I know. It's exactly what one of my parents said to me. It's exactly what one of my older siblings or my grandparents or another early caregiver in my life said to me. Or maybe you've examined this a lot in therapy or some other kind of work, and you're pretty clear on it coming maybe generally from early childhood. So that's true, but I'm going to describe a little bit in more detail and more precision where it comes from. So the source of these negative voices is your learned distress and your survival mechanism for dealing with it. So let me explain all of that jargon. Learned distress is the feeling that you absorbed very early in life that there's something wrong with you just being yourself. You absorbed it from how the people around you way back then, before the age of 2.5, felt about being themselves. Not really what they said or did, although what they said or did was coming out of how they felt, but you are absorbing how they feel And the negative parts of how they felt or what you absorbed as then the feeling that there's something wrong with you being just the way that you are. And as you are absorbing learned distress by the age of 2.5, you also, your sense of self that stores how you feel about being yourself was developing a survival mechanism to help you deal with that negative feeling that there's something wrong with you and help you fit well, kind of like a puzzle piece, with all of the people around you back then, your family, other people in your life, very early in your life. Maybe you had aunts and uncles, grandparents, babysitters. So your survival mechanism is really developed to help you fit well with those people and survive with the presence of this icky learned distress, this feeling there's something wrong with you. And so your sense of self uses learned distress and your survival mechanism to automatically generate all of the negative feelings and thoughts and self-assessments that you have constantly going on in your head, automatically, beyond your rational input or control. And also everything that's going on in your life, your situations, your relationships, your interactions with people, things that are happening in your life are also automatically generated from that same learned distress. So it's not just that you keep repeating the same thing to yourself and that's causing negative things to happen for you. It's really that the negative feelings and thoughts and the negative situations are all coming from that same source, learned distress. And again, automatically generated beyond your rational input or control. So you might start to be thinking about why it is now that I've said it's beyond your rational input or control. Maybe that's helping you understand why those things that you've been trying haven't helped you get rid of it. So specifically, it's because of something called the rational brain roadblock. So the rational brain roadblock is the fact that while your rational brain is operating, while you're thinking, while you're in your full thinking brain, while you're awake, your rational brain puts up a wall of resistance to change, a wall of protection around your sense of self, this container that stores how you feel, so that it's not changeable through your rational brain. Maybe you know this. Maybe you've realized that you cannot think your way out of that feeling that there's something wrong with you or that you always need to do better. Does that ring a bell? Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's because of the rational brain roadblock. But here's the good news I finally have for you today, because I know all of that's kind of lousy, and maybe you're thinking even, hey, listen, I've examined all this stuff in therapy. I kind of know what you're talking about. But here's the thing that's different. So Quanta Change, this process that I help guide people through, was developed in order to deal with the rational brain roadblock. In fact, break it down so you can get through it, so that you can actually access your sense of self that stores how you feel about being yourself, and so that you can permanently peel away layers of learned distress. So Quanta Change does that by working with your brain during sleep. Sleep, the reason for that is a couple of things. Number one, sleep is the time when your sense of self, this container that stores how you feel about being yourself, is getting recharged. And most of the time, unfortunately, it's been getting recharged with learned distress, like every night of our lives. Yeah, it sucks, right? To think that every night of our lives we've been going to sleep with the feeling that there's something wrong with us, and we've been recharging with that. But that's really been the case for the most part. The other reason that Quanta Change works with your brain during sleep is because that is when your rational brain is entirely shut down, and that's when the rational brain roadblock is deactivated. That wall of protection around your sense of self is deactivated. So we can get to your brain during sleep via the Quanta Change process and tell it that instead of recharging with learn to stress, you want to recharge with your core well-being, this feeling right at your center that you are just great being yourself, that you are already perfect just as you are, no efforts needed. And so when you do that, when Quanta Change allows you to do that, what happens is that you permanently peel off layers of learned distress. And as you do that, your natural well-being, that good feeling at your core, expands to take its rightful place in your sense of self. And not only do you feel better, as you can imagine, that would help you feel better, but your sense of self then has more and more well-being from which to automatically generate your feelings, your thoughts, your self-assessments, your situations, your relationships, your interactions, all of that stuff going on in your life has more and more basis from well-being instead of learn to stress, and you feel better. And in terms of the negative self-talk, what happens for people and what I've experienced for myself is that those lousy, awful, critical feelings just get quieter and quieter. It's sort of like turning down the volume on a radio. Excuse me. So instead of them yelling at you, instead of them screaming at you 24/7, they get quieter and quieter. Maybe they pop up a little bit again, and then they get even quieter. And so whether we're talking about the negative voices that come from learned distress, the feeling that we're not good enough, that there's something wrong with us in some way, or the negative voices that come from our survival mechanism that say, you can be okay as long as you do this, and as long as you do this better all the time. So those voices start to quiet down. And the voice from inside of you that says, you are great, just being yourself. You're already perfect. You don't have to try harder to be better, to get more people to like you, to achieve higher, more. Those voices really start to quiet, the negative voices start to quiet down, and the voices that say you are just great being yourself get louder and bigger. So let me give you a couple examples of what this is like. So the first one, I've had so many clients who have this particular piece of learn to stress. I couldn't even choose one to single out. So I'm just going to give you kind of a general picture. So I'm wondering if you can relate to this. Does someone ever say to you, hey, you know, this thing's going wrong in our relationship here? It might be a personal relationship. It might be something at work. Might be with a friend. And this person's saying, you know, this is really wrong here with us. And you think, oh, yeah, I know. It's my fault. It's always my fault. Is that one of your negative voices? It's always my fault. I always have to try harder. If things are going to go well for me, I'm going to have to go do better. And if things are going to go well between me and this other person, whether it's a personal relationship or something at work or something with a friend, you think, well, it's all up to me. Yeah, I can relate too. So let me tell you what starts to happen for people in these relationships, because here's the thing, that when we feel like that, oh, it's all my fault, I have to do it all, I'm going to be responsible for it all, and that's the voice going in our head, other people are all too happy to say, yeah, you know what, it is your fault. It is all your fault. You do need to do more. Wow, you know what, if only you would change this, our relationship would be better. If only you would do better, this thing better, our work group could work better. It's really all yours. Is this familiar to you? It's awful, right? Really awful. So here's what starts to happen for people who have had this negative voice and who start unlearning layers of that. I hear from people, hey, wait a second. You know, they said the same thing. They've said to me 1,000,000 times. And I just realized, wait a second, that's not mine. That's not mine. I think some of that's theirs. everything they're talking about really is they're having a bad day and they're taking it out on me. Whereas every time before they felt like, oh no, it's my fault. I made them feel awful. It's my fault. They start realizing that actually relationships are a two-way street. And very often someone else's stuff is the majority sometimes of what's going on in our relationships. Not always, but sometimes. So my clients who have this shift start to say, wait a second, that's not mine. I don't have to take that on. They're having a bad day. I'm going to have a nice day because I realize it's not mine and it's not my fault. And a lot of this can come from feeling like if we had a voice growing up that says, you don't get to want anything, you don't get to need anything, you don't have needs, you're only here for other people, that's where a lot of that voice can come from. So if that's you, that can quiet down tremendously. I see this every day in my practice. So hope that gives you some hope around that one if that sounds familiar. Let me talk about the other kind, this sort of push yourself all the time. So I had a client who had been doing this for, well, her whole life, really. From early childhood, she could give me examples of really just striving to be better in school, even as a very young child, had to be the top of her class, had to be the super achiever. And then as an adult, she was doing that, having gotten multiple higher level degrees. She was doing it in her parenting, always had to do more, always had to do more. And so she'd been unlearning layers of this learned distress. And I'll just never forget it. I'm going to read the exact words off my notes here that I have because they were so great. She said, first of all, that day that she came to me, she said, I think I'm kind of done improving myself. I was like, wow, okay, great. And then she said, I'm happy. I'm satisfied with myself. I don't need to judge myself. I don't need to try and keep making myself better. And this is something I hear from my clients all the time. I hear some form of that thing that I have had to do every single day of my life, every moment of my life that I've felt gnawing at me, yelling at me every day of my life. All of a sudden, wait a second, I don't have to do that. As if they can just walk away from that voice that literally has been just yelling at them their whole lives. They go, wait a second, I don't have to do that. And it's not because I've worked out a strategy with them and they've said, okay, I don't have to do that anymore. And they've repeated that to themselves like a mantra or something like that. It's just spontaneous and from within, from their well-being one day, their well-being says, you don't have to do that anymore. You do not have to listen to that super critical taskmaster voice anymore. You don't have to do it. And they feel so much better. Like my client said, I'm happy. I'm satisfied with myself. This is so different. So those are the kinds of changes that I see all the time when the negative self-talk quiets down as a result of peeling off layers of learned distress. So how's that feeling to you? Is it feeling maybe like, wow, there might be some hope that voice that's been really screaming at me could maybe start to go away, could quiet down, could get out of my face for a bit? It really is possible. So the first step in just finding out more to see if maybe Quanta changes for you, maybe this is a road to go down to feel better, is to find out which pattern of learned distress and survival mechanism you have. So there are 6 of these patterns. They're called the idealist, the perfectionist, the optimist, the caregiver, the defeatist, and the dictator, or we can call that one benevolent dictator. And so the reason to find out which of these 6 patterns you have is not so that you can just examine it more deeply, take it to your therapist and say, okay, see, this is another way that I understand what's wrong with me and why I feel so miserable. It's really so you can start to understand what Quanta Change will help you peel away permanently so that you can uncover your natural well-being, that unique, good feeling at your core that you are just great. You are already perfect just being yourself. So in order to do that, you can take a free test on my website, and I will send you a report with your pattern or patterns of learned distress and your survival mechanism. So to do that, you're going to go to my website, and that is Quanta Change, QUANTA change.com, and you're going to click on the free report button. So fill out that test. It's an in-depth personality tool that's scientifically validated. So it's longer than your typical sort of personality test, but it really gives us a very accurate picture of your survival mechanism and your learned distress. So go ahead to quantachange.com and click on free report. And when you take the test, I will send you your report with your pattern of learned distress, your survival mechanism, and how you might start to feel better once you start peeling off layers of learned distress with the Quanta Change process. So I hope that if those voices are getting louder and more annoying and more in your face all the time, and you're just really frustrated with it, you're feeling more hopeful that maybe you can get them out of your face, get them to quiet down, because that really is possible. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope that you will join me again next week for another way that Quanta Change really can help you feel good being you. Thank you so much. Have a good day.